Hey everyone, I know it's been a bit since I've had some videos out. I do apologize for that. My family has been looking into a medical situation with one of our family members, and we've all had to kind of help out where we can. Thankfully, things are looking a lot better than they were 2 weeks ago, but we're still not 100% out of the woods yet, so we still got a bit of things to take care of and some loose ends to take care of as well. That aside, let's go ahead and dive into this particular video that I wanted to get out for you all. Having covered the story of the recent event, Violet, Tempest, and Blooming Lycoris, I believe is how you say it, I wanted to make this video to account for a few things I felt were absolutely necessary. After seeing the comments of my part 2 of the lore stream, as well as some of the chat messages that I remember seeing, I wanted to kind of put this video together and share some of the initial thoughts that I think might really help with how people felt overall about this story. Once again, I do want to make a point that these are my own thoughts. They are very much subject to change. I have not fully gone over all the lore discrepancies from the JP and C inside, so the EN discrepancies might still be involved here. I do apologize about this in advance, but I really had a family emergency to take care of. Anyway, this video is not going to be an event summary. I plan to make that video later on. So don't worry, I'll go more in depth on this video later on. That said though, let's go ahead and dive in and talk about this particular event. The first and foremost thing I wanted to bring up is that I definitely believe that this event was necessary. As I've mentioned before, the clash of two ideologies within the Sakura Empire was going to happen at some point. We saw how tense things got between Akagi and Mikasa and Swirling Cherry Blossoms, and also how well it is known with it being asked as a question and upon the Shimmering Blue. This clash was going to happen at any point, so it's no surprising that this would be the next story beat in the Sakura Empire story. That said, this was not an ordeal that could be simply determined over a game board. I do very much believe that regardless of the outcome of this event, both sides were going to continue to follow and uphold their beliefs and go their own paths. If anything, this game was a debate in a sense. This game provided both sides a chance to really let their beliefs show, not just in words, but in their actions. We see this through the game, with Nagato refusing to turn her guns against her allies, and Akagi not batting an eye to do so. If anything, this game provided both sides a view of the convictions of the other party. It is not a surprise that either side wants the best for their nation. However, both sides do have very different approaches onto how to obtain that. Musashi's role in this entire situation was somewhat interesting. While she may not have been the focal point of the event, I think she did have a pretty big role to play. At first glance, she seems to be a mediator or a referee to this whole situation. Someone who's more interested in hearing out and seeing the convictions of both parties in full view. But as time goes on, we see her start to push and test both sides with some of the actions that she takes. She's not just someone hearing them out, but also someone that's wanting to push them to really test if they truly believe in what they say. She's not only giving them a chance to show their intentions and ideals, but also testing them to make sure that they're willing to stand by them to the very end. In that way, both sides succeeded in that. They upheld their goals and beliefs in the end. That said, there is still the last angle of Musashi's involvement. Jinsu Meta's appearance and the discussion of a test with Watatsumi and the Black Cube suggests the game being a situation of smoke and mirrors for such a test to occur. This side of things is part of why I believe Shinano was not involved in this event. If anyone would be able to point out the use of Watatsumi and the Origin Cube, it would be Shinano. Now we also know that Shinano has been in discussions with Nagato and Mikasa, so there's a good chance that she'd be more on their side if anything. I could definitely admit that I disliked Musashi's obscuring of what actually happened in the end, with Akagi tapping into the Origin Cube and going down the meta rabbit hole. For Mikasa and Nagato, it's unfortunate that they might have only thought that this was simply part of the game, rather than something more sinister in nature. Going further, I think this paints something as well. Musashi, and maybe even Yamato, both back Akagi's stance. If you consider that they allowed Akagi to utilize this power, while also obscuring its use, as well as discussing the results of a test with Jinsu Meta, I think Musashi isn't as unbiased as she first comes off as. That said, I don't think she planned to completely reject the ideas of Mikasa and Nagato. Otherwise, I feel she would have shut them down as much as possible in this particular game. Then again, she could have been avoiding that to keep up the facade. This also could be what Akagi's side would see as the harsh reality check for Mikasa and Nagato. The Arbiters themselves are pretty strong. Even if they were just simply a copy in this particular game, it didn't take away from their strength. Akagi being able to single-handedly destroy one is very telling, and it shows that ideals may not last if they don't have the power to back it. This might have been what Akagi and maybe even Musashi wanted to show Mikasa and Nagato. While their ideals may win hearts and minds, they may not win wars. There are two more things I want to bring up as well. The first is that I know a handful of people have been somewhat annoyed with how everything can feel predetermined. The only thing I can really say to that is determinism is a concept that Azur Lane has touched a bit in its story. For those that don't know what that is, it's the idea that all events, including human actions, are determined ultimately by external causes, and not by the will of the humans involved. When you consider how the Sirens have behaved thus far, you can see this to a degree. They act as if they know exactly what is going on. They may experiment a little, but their testing during events still keeps within their own parameters. On the contrary, when things don't go the way they expect, it shocks them and throws them for a loop. Shinano is a very good example of this alone. Now, granted, I don't believe that this is entirely the case for all settings, as Compiler's Fall is another example that I believe was not supposed to happen. Secondly is, well, whether I think Akagi is in the right or not. In my own personal opinion, I don't think she is. We've seen Akagi's hunger for power over the course of how things have been in the story, so this behavior of hers is nothing out of the ordinary. She's mentioned that she's seen things of which I can believe to be the destruction of the Sakura Empire. It's possible this is the reason that Musashi sides with Akagi, because Shinano more than likely has discussed some of her dreams with Musashi as well. Akagi having a possible solution might also assist her in gaining the support of Musashi. That said, I personally still want to side with Mikasa here, and that the Sirens could be tricking her into believing their story. It's hard to take anything the Sirens say at face value, if you consider Helena Meta's point of us seeing only what the Sirens want us to see. That trust from them gets worse when you consider the events of Rondo at Rainbow's End, especially with what Compiler did towards the end of that event. Another point to make is when Akagi mentioned that Bismarck foolishly rejected this gift. I think she couldn't be any more wrong. I don't think Bismarck was foolish to reject it, but rather that Akagi was foolish to accept it without any consideration. What separates her and Bismarck is what I very much believe a fascinated observer back at Scarezo of Iron and Blood. The defeat of the Iron Blood was a foregone conclusion. No matter how obvious I made it, no matter how many hints I dropped, she refused to be swayed from her course. And this is precisely the kind of mind I wanted to study, one which defied all of our statistical models. Free from influence is something that has intrigued the observer. Bismarck could very much be that particular type of person, whereas Akagi clearly is not. When you consider the situations of both Bismarck and Akagi, you'll notice both of them had very similar situations in that their faction's fate has already been revealed to them. The Sirens then proceed to offer some kind of solution in the form of the Black Cube. Now, at first, Bismarck chose to use it against Hood, but then changed her mind and decided to go her own way in search of a method to save her faction. Akagi, on the other hand, accepted it from the start and has yet to stray from that path. If a character is free from external influence, it will be much harder to control or even manipulate them. When one cannot be controlled or manipulated, it's harder to predict what they will do in the end. This was all the more clear when the Ironblood finessed the Sirens and defeated Compiler. I think the Sirens are trying to keep Akagi on this path that she is currently taking. I fear what this means for her, and I think I have an idea where it will go in the end. I can at least tell that Musashi isn't blindly following Akagi's idea. She's willing to humor it, but even she has her own reservations and concerns about all of this overall. I do believe that the main reason is that Musashi knows Akagi at least has a potential answer, even if it might seem disastrous from our own point of view. While I cannot say I was fond of Musashi's deception in this game, I can also recognize that Mikasa and Nagato probably would have not have been fond of knowing what Akagi did in this event, which in all honesty could have made things worse between them. If anything, all three groups here learned something from this game. Mikasa and Nagato got to understand Akagi's feelings in the end. Akagi got a chance to experiment with her power in a controlled environment. Musashi got to see both sides' conviction play out before her, as well as the risks of going the direction Akagi believes in. For me, I knew Azur Lane was going to have some dark moments in it. Akagi's actions at the end of this event did not alleviate that fear, it elevated it. I'm worried about her being a useful pawn for the Sirens and their end goals. What worries me all the more is, will she be willing to accept the future that she so desires if it comes with a devastating cost? Will she really feel like she's won if she loses the entire Sakura Empire while fighting to protect it? How will she fare if she loses everything? One of my favorite lines in the Sakura Empire's storyline comes from Mikasa during her specific event, and to this day I think it plays a very vital role. What is that everything to you? In the moment you exclaim, "I will fight for this world," is there a force welling up from within your heart? And when you feel hopelessness or in despair, is your everything not the fate of humanity and the world, but rather your friends, rivals, and celebratory moments like this banquet? To discard that everything is to disavow yourself of your being, and those who reject their very being cannot hope to ever overcome their limits. If getting what you want leads to you throwing away everything that is a part of you, that would be to rid yourself of who you are. There is only one time that I have seen that so far in this story, and that was when Kronstadt lost herself during her own event. The only reason she was able to return back to herself was because Kronstadt remembered her everything. Her mission, her friends, her nation that she calls home. If Kage is willing to sacrifice things for her own end goal, would her everything matter in the end? What if she has nothing left? That is why I'm terrified of what will happen to Akagi. Now, I can understand everyone's criticisms for this event, but I do believe that this was absolutely necessary as a story beat. I can at least admit that I didn't know how to feel about this particular event in its entirety. It took me a bit to take a step back and really look at everything from a broad point of view. I think the major point of this event was not to only show us how Akagi felt, but to also cover a rather uncomfortable topic, the extent and stress that is brought on by the internal conflict the Sakura Empire currently faces. There will come a time where one side will have to yield way. I hope when that time comes, the Sakura Empire makes the right call, whichever direction that is. As for Akagi, I can't help but be scared for what will happen to her. I wish I could end this video on a happy note, but I fear this is where our story is going now. So what do you all think? I hope these thoughts of mine helped to get a better grasp as to what this event was really about. Feel free to let me know in the comments below. I'll try to address any questions that you might have still that are lingering past this video. If not, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys all again real soon.